Hey guys, welcome to Every Day at the Well, a UBC Women's Ministry podcast where we dive into the stories and experiences of women from all walks of life, just like the women at the well who encountered Jesus on an ordinary day. Here at Every Day at the Well, we're going to hear from some incredible women who, through their own unique journeys, point us to Jesus. Whether you're a busy professional working 9 to 5, a devoted stay-at-home mom, and maybe a student, or anywhere in between that, this podcast is for you. Together, we're going to discover how just our everyday lives and our stories, the mundane moments of our lives, can be infused with extraordinary and love that we receive from the Lord, and that we can share it together. We don't have to do this alone. So, if you're like me, you're going to grab a cup of really good coffee, the good kind, find a little cozy spot, or maybe you're in the car line for pickup, maybe you're on a run, maybe you're on a walk, maybe it's just the morning and you're ready to listen to something different. Either way, we hope you will join us for Every Day at the Well. Let's get started. Hey guys, I'm really excited that we finally get to have our very first interview for the Every Day at the Well podcast. Now, this one's really special to me because this one's with Caitlyn, Hayter, who is a dear friend of mine, but also just someone who loves people and loves the world. This episode is going to be filled with talks about living in community, living in ministry, living among families from other countries, refugee families. It's a story of infertility and foster care and a hopeful adoption. And so Caitlyn's story is beautiful, and it's been a long journey for her and for her sweet husband. And I'm just excited that she agreed to come on here as our very first guest to talk to you more about her story and how God has been with her every step of the way, in the highs and the lows, in the waiting, in the long waiting, questions of uncertainty that she's had to work through. And so I hope you enjoy this episode. It's a little long, but there's so much good stuff in it that it was hard to cut it short. So I hope you will just go on a long walk today or sit in the car and take another lap around the neighborhood a few times because this is a good one. All right. Thanks so much. Here we go. We are back for our first official episode of At the Well, and I am so excited to have a good friend of mine, Caitlyn Hayter, here with us. And Caitlyn is someone who, if you meet her, she's definitely just a bright light everywhere she goes, and she has a really cool story to share, and so we thought she'd be a great fit for our very first one. So Caitlyn, tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, what did your family look like growing up, and where'd you go to college, just all that kind of stuff.
Okay. I'm from Arlington. I grew up with my mom and my dad, and I have an older brother and a younger sister. And I went to UT Arlington, and I majored in English and Spanish.
Awesome. And she's fluent in Spanish.
Yeah.
How long did
need a little practice.
How long did you take Spanish classes? Was it like a major in Spanish, you said?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So all the way through. Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking you took some Spanish, but you actually majored in Spanish.
I was majoring in English and minoring in Spanish, and then I did a go now mission trip to Venezuela. And I came back and I was like, I love this. And my advisor was like, just double major.
That's
so,
so smart.
Okay.
I've told both my kids, you're getting a minor in Spanish. It's just a good thing to have. I mean,
and the skill of learning a new language,
it's good for your brain, and it connects you to people that normally you wouldn't maybe be connected with. So when I first kind of knew about who you were, the first thought was she has a heart for people, ministry, missions, but not in a church context. So, tell me a little bit about when you felt like God gave you a heart for people, especially with international people, and your jobs after college, and kind of what drew you into those fields.
Yeah. So I like this question because I feel like I'm still asking God to give me a heart for people. I have to give my parents a lot of credit because just the way that they raised us and the way that they lived their life and continue to live their life, they really wanted us to know just our neighbors. And my dad would once or twice a year, he would rent an aerator, I think that's what it's called, from Home Depot that like puts little holes in your yard.
Oh,
and
cool.
Our whole family would go to each of our neighbors, and my dad would say, hey, I'm gonna do this, there's no catch, like I just want to do this for you, is it okay? It's like good for your yard or something, I don't know. And then we would meet our neighbors, and then he would just say, is there anything we can pray for you about, is there anything? And so
he would just go up and down the street?
Yeah, we would all go together, the
whole family.
Yeah.
And is it you and your sister
and my brother
and your brother? So family of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so cool.
And we're like, my brother's 3 years older than me, and my sister's 2 years younger than me.
Okay. So would you do this like once a year, or was it like all throughout the year?
Yeah, once or twice a year, and then we'd have relationships and try to like follow up and stuff. And so that was just kind of like the way that whatever they were doing, we just did it with them.
Right.
And then my parents also, their church has a lot of missionaries that they support.
Okay.
And when they would like come home, like transitioning on or off the field, or come home to visit family, my parents would host them. And growing up, we lived in a really small house. Like it was like 3 bedrooms, I think, and they would just make it work. So like whole families would stay with us for weeks.
That's so
and
cool.
So we would like hear their stories and try food from their countries, and then they had friends who were very involved with international students at UTA. And I remember a couple of times they would move all of the furniture out of their living room, and we would host a Super Bowl party for like hundreds of Chinese international students.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Hundreds?
Maybe not hundreds, maybe like 100, but it felt like a lot.
Still, that's a lot.
Yeah, and so I mean, my parents definitely had this idea of like, you give or you go, and they weren't called to go, and they gave like above and beyond. Like I know that they gave financially, but I also know we didn't have a lot of money. And so they just gave like, I mean, they did everything they could to support people who were ministering cross-culturally. And so
I love that.
So that was kind of just like the way we operated. And so a lot of like, I guess like interaction with different cultures and stuff. But I wanted to share that too, because I like kind of hated it some growing up. Like I was super, super shy, and so like always have people around. And I remember really distinctly one day my dad just basically was like, being shy can just be who you are, but it can also just be a really like self-centered mindset. And so he was like, if you can get out of the way, God's gonna like, he's gonna do really cool stuff, and you're gonna have fun. And he kind of taught me like how to ask questions to hear other people's stories, and that really helped me. And
how old were you, do you think, when all that was happening?
Man, probably like 3rd and 4th grade. I think that was like kind of like when I was the most shy. And just kind of like, oh well, this could be really fun. And then in junior high, my parents moved to a bigger house, and they like purposely overbought, like they bought a house bigger than they needed to like keep hosting people. And so that's when I was like, okay, this can be fun. And then and they just kind of continued to do that. And so then when I went, so that was like the start of it, of like, okay, like there's people with really cool stories and really cool experiences, and just wanting to know those stories. And then in high school, I went to Mexico a lot with my friend's church, and I loved it. Like I was just like, I loved Hispanic culture and all of that. And then in college, I was really involved with the Baptist Student Ministry at UTA.
Yes.
And the culture of the BSM was very like evangelical, lots of international students. And my freshman year, there were 3 students who became believers from like closed countries. And so that really like rocked my world. Like I kind of, I'd been around a lot of Christians and a lot of people who were ministering to other people, but that was the first time that I saw somebody's life change from like, in a country that we couldn't go into, or that you couldn't have gone into.
Exactly.
I know.
Exactly. It's amazing too to think how the nations are here. Like they, for the longest time, like in the early, 80s and maybe early 90s, it was like the 1040 window. Like you've got to go, and we've got to equip you, and you got to learn the language and go. And now, especially even in 2024, it's really cool, especially where we live in Arlington, Fort Worth area, just to see that the nations have come here.
Yes.
And it's really neat. Not to say that we can't continue to go, but what a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
And UTA has got, it's incredible.
Yeah,
It's so diverse and such a neat opportunity. So you did all those things. I know you met your husband Josh somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
So when you and Josh got married, you guys decided to move to Ladera Palms, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So he was already living there. Actually.
He was there. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so talk a little bit about, about living in Ladera Palms and the people, but then why you did that. Like, what was the purpose?
Yeah. So
and maybe talk about Ladera Palms first, because most people are probably like, "What's that?"
Yeah, right.
Sounds like this tropical land,
like a really nice apartment.
I know, like a really nice apartment complex.
Yeah. So, and actually now it's called Monarch Pass. So
it
changed.
is?
Yeah, I don't know why they changed the name, and it makes me sad. They changed it.
I love the name Ladera, because we would always be like Ladera.
I know. So I'd always heard about Ladera Palms and that there were a lot of refugees living there, because my church did a lot with World Relief. So I guess that was another touch point with international people. But so Josh was actually a case manager working with refugees through World Relief.
That's right.
And so they resettle refugees from all those close countries where wars and unrest and stuff is happening. And so there's a lot of people that live there from Afghanistan, from Syria, Burma, Bhutan, Somalia. There's a lot of people from Somalia.
Interesting.
Pretty close places, and that have, there's the refugees typically are higher up. There's a reason why they have to get out.
Right.
There's somebody in their country who doesn't want them there, doesn't want them alive.
Okay, so a lot of the families came from just a lot of different places around the world, which is really neat. Is Ladera back in the day, was it one of a few apartments that they settled refugees?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and it's really close. At that time, it was really close to a lot of the offices that resettle refugees. So, so it's like South Fort Worth.
Okay. Awesome. Well, and so why did y'all? Because if you think about it, I mean, I'm thinking newlyweds, you get married, you have your wedding, you might go somewhere for a honeymoon, and then it's you get to start your life together. And I remember you guys were we're going to stay at Ladera. We're going to live there among the people. Yeah. And so, why did y'all decide to do that? And just maybe briefly, what was that like?
Yeah, we both felt very called to some kind of ministry cross-culturally. We love it. We had experiences with it. And so, it was just kind of also why not?
Right. And he was already there.
Yeah, he was already there.
And had those relationships, yes. I'm assuming. Yeah.
And I really wanted to. And just a time in my life that I knew, we didn't have kids. I was teaching English through Catholic Charities, and so I knew that I would have a lot of crossover between my students. And I guess actually when we got married, I didn't have a job yet at Catholic Charities. But anyways, I just knew that I wanted to spend my life doing that. And after college, I had worked with international students at UTA through the BSM and loved it. And we were just really excited to do it together.
I love that. I just love that. Did you guys continue on your parents' legacy in the sense of inviting people over or going over? What did kind of the day-to-day look like?
Yeah. And really my parents have laid that foundation of kind of just bringing people along with what you do. Yeah. And so just wanting our friends or whatever, just be hey, you have to meet these people. And I remember also though being blown away by refugees hospitality. There would be a big storm and there'd be knocks on our doors of our neighbors sending their sons with plates of food of I want to make sure you have food if there's going to be a big storm. Yes. Don't go to the grocery store, we have enough food. Just this, the
hospitality. I mean, and so Caitlyn and I help lead a mission trip with the middle school youth group kids, along with some others. And so you and I have both seen that firsthand in Houston when we go, and how these families don't have much of anything. Like they're like Uber driving for their real like big job for the family, and we come over and they're just, here's your tea, here's your food, here's your snacks, and it's overwhelming. So I'm sure you saw a lot of that too. I just think that that's really cool that just the foundation of your marriage was started in that context of ministry. And we're going to go into a little bit more about your family that you've created since getting married, but real quickly, because this is off script, but you touched on something that I think is important for people to hear. When you said that whatever you're doing, you bring people along with you, you know, and I think that's a struggle that most people feel. I think anyone who's listening will say, but my kids have this. Like if you have kids and you're in activities and you have church and you have school and you have, you know, baseball, football, all these things. How do you, in a modern context of family, do that in your family? I mean, I know it's not perfect probably, but like, what advice, I guess, would you give?
And that is probably the thing that is the hardest for me in motherhood now, is wanting to make space for the things that I used to do, and it is hard. I mean, I do have to like plan ahead, but again, just doing it. And like
just doing it. I think that's the big one.
Yeah, and again, there's times where I do have to say no to stuff, or to, you know, visiting a friend's house or something, because my kids will be absolutely crazy. But also like I'm trying to be really intentional on not overfilling our schedules, so that there is space for that, or like, I mean, it is just literally a balance. And my parents were also really conscious of that. I feel like growing up, like they didn't sign us up for everything, so that we did have time as a family, but then also like remembering that like we are not, like, the kids in my home right now are not yet Christians. And so like it is also my job to share the gospel with them and spend time with them. And so I think that is like a balancing act that I really struggle with.
It is. It's hard because it is your ministry. It's not your only ministry, but it is a big one. Okay, so let's kind of transition into so you and Josh, you get married, you move to Ladera, you do this great ministry, you've got a job, he's got a job, you're both working with international families, refugee families, and then you decide, let's start a family. So tell us, you know, I'll just combine two questions. When do you remember wanting to start a family? And then tell us the best you can about just your journey into motherhood. And that is, just so everyone knows, that is a very loaded question. So I'll just kind of sit back and drink my coffee now.
So, I mean, I always wanted to be a mom. I feel like that was like, I just always knew no matter what, I would be a mom. And I don't think I ever like really thought about what that would look like. And I had some friends growing up who were adopted, and I actually had a friend in elementary school who was in foster care, and I remember her telling me she wasn't sure if she was going to stay with the family she was with, I think this was in first grade, or if she was going to go to a new family. And then I remember one day on the playground she just wasn't there, and I asked the teacher, and they were like, oh, she got moved to a different home and to a different school. And that, I just remember her name was Portia. And
how old were you?
First grade.
Okay. Yeah, it's cool that stuck with you.
Yeah, and just thinking like, oh wow, like why is that her story and not my story, and just kind of like wrestling with that. So anyway, when we got married, we were living at Ladera. Josh was working for UPS, and so it was kind of a cool thing because a lot of the other women at Ladera, their husbands had similar jobs, like they were truck drivers or, you know, like blue collar jobs, and so they worked long hours, and I just hung out with them a ton. And all the time they were like, why don't you have a baby? Why don't you have a baby? And I remember just all of a sudden being like, well, why don't I? So then we like pretty quickly though we were like, okay, something's not quite right. And so I think probably about a year of like fertility stuff testing, we just knew and that's like a whole nother topic, but
another episode.
That we wouldn't have biological kids, and that even like IVF or fertility treatments just wouldn't work for us. And so we grieved that, and like grieved that hard, but like literally at the same time. It was COVID, so everything was shut down.
Yes.
And we were spending a lot of time with our neighbors, and there was this kid who was just kind of a troublemaker. He was American and was just getting into everything and clearly was not supervised like he should have been. And we had some of our good friends were like our next door neighbors like doing ministry with us, and I remember telling my friend like, I'm just gonna call CPS, like he should be watched or whatever. And my friend was like, what if we just love him, like what if we love him, invite him to come with us? And I was like, that's not gonna work. But long story short, it did, and she was right. And it turns out that CPS was involved in his family, and just a really, really hard situation. And
did you say this little boy was a neighbor?
Yeah, he was a neighbor.
Okay.
So the Ladera Palms, where Monarch Pass, is refugees and like low income housing.
Gotcha. Okay.
So a lot of people who just have a lot of different issues going on and a lot of broken families. And anyway, so this little boy, I think he was 9 at this time. He told us like, hey, if they tell me I can't stay with my mom, he was kind of back and forth between mom and grandma, who all lived at the apartment complex. He was like, if they tell me that I can't stay with them, could I ever live with y'all? Like, would y'all ever let me? And Josh and I, like the same week, we're just having questions of like, should we adopt? Everything was closed because it was COVID. And we weren't married long enough to get on some like domestic adoption waiting list or whatever. And so Josh had kept bringing up foster care. And I was like, I just don't think I can do it. Like, I can't give a kid back. And anyway, so this little boy, like when he asked that, I was just like, yes, immediately. And I'd never met his mom. We kept trying. And I mean, I remember just telling Josh, like, I love him so much. And like, he's come so far, and like, I love his mom because she made him, and she's important to him. And so anyway, that was when I was like, okay, like I
could do this.
Yeah. Let's try it.
That's awesome. And just for anyone listening, I know we kind of glossed over the infertility part of this story, but that was a very long and hard and grueling time for you. And I think for any of us, because I've been down that road too, who've been through infertility, that's just it is a whole, that's why it needs a whole segment of itself, because that is such a hard thing for a woman and a husband and a man, whatever, to go through, but especially for the female who's trying to figure out what's going on, what's wrong with my body. And so that was a huge part of this, but for time's sake, we're not going to go through it. But
and Jennifer and other people at UBC were so, I mean, there for us, and that was part of why we also were like, we could do foster care because we have this really great church who's going to support us, like the way that we felt supported through that. So. Yeah,
our church has a big heart for all of it, because it's just so, families are, I mean, honestly, it's everything. You know, families is what makes the individual, and it's what we send out into the world. And so family ministry is such a huge part of all of our hearts. So we go. So now you're open to foster care. So now you're like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
You know.
So we kind of just randomly we were like, okay, let's look for a house, and we had a realtor. Anyway, long story short, we got a house and then started the process, and we got our first. So that also took a long time.
Yes, all of this. We're acting like it was just a weekend thing. It's like no, all these things,
like years.
Yeah, for anyone that listens to this and is like, I'm sitting in such a hard season. Like Caitlyn's story and so many stories are so filled with like these long seasons of unknowns and long seasons of wait, and even though like this is like a quick podcast, like everything she's talking about was like a long season of like purely depending on the Lord. So anyway, sorry.
And it was a hard time, but in another way it was really sweet. Like when I look back at like things I journaled, because it really felt like it was Josh and I against infertility, or against just like brokenness or broken families. And so like Jennifer said, it was a really I don't know if I've ever grown in my faith the way that I did during that season, because cool. I mean I like to fix stuff and I like immediate results, and there were absolutely no immediate results, and it was COVID, and so like doctor's appointments or whatever, like Josh and I weren't together. We're like FaceTiming each other as we're doing this like
Crazy
really
to
hard
think about
stuff.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway.
I just don't know how any of us really grow without those moments. I mean, I look back too on my life and I'm like there are things I'm like, gosh, why did that have to happen? But then I'm like, but I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't have to go through that. And so it's always good to remind ourselves that some of these hardest seasons of our lives are like the sweetest on the other side.
Yes.
Like the ones we grow from. Our character grows, our patience, our love for other people. So, okay, so you do the appointments and you realize, so pick up from there.
Yeah. So then in January 2022, I think, yes, we got our first placement in
wow.
I know, it's not crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, she was 4 months old and she was just the best thing ever.
Wow.
And
I guess 2022? Gosh, for some reason it feels like you've been doing foster care for like 10 years. I know it's only been a couple, but
I feel like I've aged a lot in that process.
I just feel like it's been so neat. Okay, so that was in January 2022. Okay.
Yeah, and so she was with us for 16 months, and then now she reunified with her parents, and she's with her parents. And
that's awesome.
They're doing really good. We get to see her, which is another, like, again, that could be a whole thing, but huge answer to prayer. And she's with her mom and dad, and they're doing good.
It's just a really cool picture of how the foster care system can work, and how a family could need a little time to get their stuff together, a little time of respite from raising children, and that you guys got to take her on and love on her, and then she was able to go back with her family, and then you still have a relationship with that family. It's honestly, it's so beautiful. I was talking to someone about it just the other day, because we were with you guys, and that her family was there at church, and we were just like, look at this is like incredible. That again, back to what we just said, that going through a season of brokenness and hard things for a family is now like this beautiful thing. Without, there's still lots of issues all over the place with all of us, but you get through them, and it's just really neat. So
and when she was going back again, that was another thing that was like, I don't think I can do this again. Like, it didn't seem fair, it didn't seem right. But like, God is good and His plan is good, and I feel like I cried a lot, and like people at UBC let me just feel all the emotions, and just lots of reminders that like that this is going to be okay, and like God's plan is good. And so it's so cool to see her in her family. And like, this is right. Like it's
and her family loves her.
Yes,
they love her deeply. And
her mom has become a source of encouragement to me with the kids that we currently have. And
I love that.
You know, in foster care, you'll find that a lot of families themselves, a lot of the parents themselves grew up in foster care. And so she had some just good advice of how to help the kids who are in our home right now, of how to help them like know their story and how to tell that.
Cool.
Yeah. And they're, cool. I don't really know. I know that now they are following Jesus, and that, I mean, that's everything, you know. I do think that because of, they had their own issues or whatever, but because they are following Jesus, I think that's like literally the only reason that they are reunified and are doing well. Is because of Jesus. And that's not everybody's story, but it is really cool that there is, that we're seeing healing in that.
That's awesome. And remind me, how old was she when you got her?
She was 4 months old when she came, and then she was, she wasn't 2 yet. Josh knows all the numbers.
Yeah.
I think so, like 20 months, 22 months.
So but she spent her first birthday with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything with us, yeah.
And that's
sitting
just
up,
so cool, especially for any family that's thinking about it, like fostering, like the foundation that was laid for her in a time that she needed it, and that those years of brain development and growth and just needing to be loved by somebody, that she was able to receive that, even though she went back and, you know, and it was hard for you, like, that's shaped her in such a solid foundation. Okay, so where are you at now? So what happened after that?
And then we also had 2 brothers that were with us for about 5 or 6 months. There was a newborn. He was 4 days old.
Okay.
And then his brother was moved with us. He was 2. Okay. So at one point we had a not quite 2-year-old, a 9-month-old, and a newborn. So that was wild.
I remember that.
But yeah, they went with a family member, and that's also a good situation. Okay, and they had also some older siblings that we knew that long story, but they weren't in care, but they update us often on how the kids are doing and stuff. Cool. Which again, like, that's just something that, I mean, we really asked for. And I know, again, like, sometimes it's healthy not for there to be a connection, and we don't see those kids, but it is cool to, like, see pictures and know that they're doing good.
That they're doing well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's gotta make your heart feel warm on
and
the
again
inside.
I'm like talking about this lightly. Each of those situations, like, it was not the plan for them to leave as quickly as they did or to leave at all. And so those were both really hard situations. But again, like, looking back, I'm like, okay, like, this was good and this was right. And, like, God's plan is not for families to be broken. Like, God's plan is for families to be together. And so, again, trying to see that is God's plan. And there's a lot of heartache when that doesn't happen, but also a lot of beauty. So anyway.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about, so then you had the placement with the boys and then they left, and then the girl you had first had left. And so what happened after those kiddos? It's kind of all, the timeline is kind of confusing, but so while the first girl was still with us, that's right,
we got a call for we got a call for a 9-month-old little girl that was about to turn 10 months, and they said she just basically is going to be like respite, like basically babysitting until she's going to go back with her grandpa. He's going to become a like licensed foster parent, so just for 3 weeks. And they were like, she's teething, she's really unhappy, like she might have some medical issues. And so we said yes. And I remember that night when Josh got home, and I mean, she was crying a lot and she was teething and just really like sad or whatever. And when Josh got home, she just immediately like calmed down, and Josh was like, Kate, I love her. and he, we
always been very drawn to her.
Yeah, our like personalities, I feel like we attach quickly, and that is not everybody's story. But I think we do just like attach quickly, but there was just something even different about her. And I was like, Josh, like it's only gonna be 3 weeks, like she's going back. And I kept like reminding him that, reminding our families. And anyway, so she did not ever leave and she's still with us. And then the first little girl went home, and so that was really hard. But we knew that this little girl had 2 brothers in another foster home, and we now had space and like mental capacity to have more kids. And so we long story short, but they ended up coming with us. And the little girl, I don't know if I can say her name, I don't know, I'll just say I don't know. So little sister, she like wasn't walking or talking, and she was over a year old, and we were kind of concerned, and she had different like therapists involved or whatever. But within a week of her brothers coming with us, she was running.
Oh my gosh.
And it was crazy? Like she needed them. So she was with us for a full 6 months before they were placed with us, which is kind of crazy. And that's just how it works. Everything moves either really fast or really slow, but for whatever reason, that's how long it took.
And how old was she again when you had her?
So when she came, she was 9 months old. When her brothers came with us, she was like 15 months, 16 months. So
it's crazy how just her ability, she felt safe, or something made her feel filled where she could move more. And then that crazy?
Yeah, and then she started like babbling more. Like she was saying some stuff, but she started talking, and so their bond is super strong. And again, the whole plan with them all along was reunification of some kind. And so there was a grandpa that was great. There was talk of going back with mom and dad. It was just kind of all over the place. And then pretty quickly, though, once we learned more about the case, we just knew that it wasn't going to be in their best interest to go back with mom. And so we were really pushing for grandpa, just because we'd seen by this point like successful reunifications. And anyway, long story short, after talking with the grandpa and whatever, he just was like, I think they will be best with you guys, and I'm gonna take myself out of the equation, but I still want to be grandpa. Gotcha. And so he lives a couple hours away, and so we try to FaceTime him like once a month, so they can know their other cousins and stuff. And so anyway, they've been with us. So little sister's been with us almost 2 years now, and the boys over a year, and we are going to adopt them next week.
Yay!
So
that's new news as of like what 3 days ago.
Yes.
It's so crazy. Isn't that just incredible?
Yeah.
I mean, and they just all like, it feels like it's always felt right. Like ever since you've had them, all three of them, it's always felt like this just feels right, you know? I know that there's a lot of, you know, there's still a lot though that happens when you adopt, and you know, like you mentioned earlier, you know, families weren't meant to be broken apart, and so I know that there's still a long journey ahead with all of that.
And it's kind of interesting though, like talking, so the oldest is 6, so there's 6, 4, and 2. The oldest is 6, and he's like pretty, like, I feel like emotionally intelligent. Like he's had a lot of play therapies. We've had a lot. I mean, it was a hard transition when they came to us, and we just basically like told our fostering agency that we need help. We need counselors. We need to know. I didn't know how to parent that age. Josh and I didn't know how to parent together that age. So, anyways, we had a lot of help. And anyway, just I've told him, you know, how we wanted to have biological kids, and that wasn't happening and whatever, but God is still good in that, and like it's cool how like that opened us up for fostering, and like I would like to say that we would have done that no matter what. But like who knows, you know, like we would have probably just gotten busy doing life and didn't have a chance to meet these kids, and I've talked to him a lot too about how you know, it isn't God's plan that he's not with his biological kids, but like my mom grew up without her biological dad, and she still grieves that. She's in her 60s and she still grieves it, and she always said though, like whenever the ideal is lacking, like God's grace abounds, and like she had a really great stepdad, and just telling him like that sadness is never gonna go away, but like in the middle of that sadness there's also a lot of joy, and like I mean he feels like our church is his family, and he loves our church, and he loves your son. I know.
It's like Woo's little best buddy. They are 2 peas in a pod.
And so,
which is really special for them because you know, Woo's also adopted, and also of a different, you know, cultural background. And so it just makes me, even that, it's like even God knew that these boys might need a friend that is in a similar scenario. And it's just neat how, you know, there's always things that we have to work through, whether you're, you know, dealing with, you know, children who are adopted or like the stresses of life in general. But it's really cool how God goes before us and just sets things in motion that, you know, yes, is life perfect? No. But it's just neat to see, I don't know, just how God takes care of his people. That's been a big theme in my life lately, for just being in nature and looking around and seeing how God has cared for the thing. Like I don't water like our trees in the front yard. I mean, there's so many things that the wildflowers, there's so many things that are just nurtured and taken care of without human hands, and I think he does it so much more for our children. So that's right. So what is your best advice if there's a family that was interested in foster care, getting involved in that world? It's a loaded question, but what is your best advice, you know, for someone who's in that season of their life where they're like, I'm thinking about this, I'm listening to this podcast, and now is this another nudge? You know, I always feel like for me, whenever I'm like really processing something big, I start like praying and praying and praying, and the way I feel like my prayers are somewhat answered or not is by, I have like little things happen, like, oh, they brought this up, and why did they bring that up? Because I've been praying about that. Or why did she say that in our conversation? Like, does she know I've been praying about this? So anyway, so what would you say to that family out there? To keep praying and really see it as a family thing, and whatever that looks like. I think it's really easy to love cute little kids, and it's harder to love messy families. And I think that was something that I was kind of like naive or maybe like immature in at first, and that but really like that is God's heart, and that's like. Even, I mean, it kind of relates back to like international stuff, is like, you know, we wanted to see whole families worship Jesus. And like, and you see that all throughout scripture. And so the same with foster care is like,
if you get into it just to adopt one kid, you kind of miss the whole picture.
Right.
And even if you adopt that one kid, I mean, and with our kids now, like every night we pray for any kid who's ever been in our home. So like the kids in our home know the names of past kids, even kids we've like done respite for, you know?
Yeah.
And, but also reminding them to pray for their families, that there is healing, and like that is the ultimate goal, is that they know Jesus. So yeah, I guess that would be my advice, is to see it that way. But also, yeah, I think like, yeah, same thing. Like if you're interested in it, like you don't have to adopt. There is a need for foster only families, and especially families that just need a little bit of help before their kids come back. And I think like our first placement, that's what their parents say a lot, is like, thank you for helping us when we couldn't do it. And like, I mean, being a parent is really hard, and you all need a break. And that's something too that I'm hearing from people, is like the need for more homes is really real, and the need for like respite homes. Like you can being a respite care provider is like basically you babysit for other foster parents, like if they have to go out of the state or the country or whatever, or just need a break. And I think it would be super cool if more churches, or our church specifically, had several families that was like, okay, I know that they can watch my kids for the weekend while I have to do whatever. And so that's a really important thing, of like a trusted person. And there's a lot of ways, and not everybody has to be a foster parent. And like, and that's too like what I've seen with my parents, is like, if that's not your calling, like give everything you can to support
the people
who are doing it.
Exactly.
And so, and I think like I can think of so many different names of people at our church who have just really, really helped us, or even just asked like, do you have a court date coming up? Like, can I pray for you? And that is really sweet, because that can be really challenging. And so
the courts make those big decisions for these kids' lives and your life and their families' lives. And I think that's just a neat thing to keep in mind, is, I mean, because you don't think about it that way, as far as like giving the families a break. So I know for me, with a family, with a roof over my head, with, you know, we're not like rich by any stretch, but we do have enough to feed our kids and to clothe them and to do activities outside of school. And how hard that is. So imagine how hard it must be if you don't have those support networks, if you don't have those finances, if putting the roof over the head is hard, and heaven forbid there's a substance abuse, mental health situation, and these families and these moms and dads are just like, I need to get myself together. But what do I do with my kids in the meantime? And that's where foster care families can really love on them in a way that says, go take care of yourself, go do all the things you need to do, and we're going to take care of your kids.
And that's kind of been a mindset shift for me too, is also like, how do you support people so their kids don't go into care? How do you who's struggling in your community, who you think is on the brink of maybe some mental breakdown or whatever, or substance abuse, or how can you...
Well, and I like your story that you mentioned when you were at Ladera, and how there was that boy and you were real concerned about it, and your friend was like, well, what if we just really love them? And what if we take that approach? Not to say you can't still call CPS.
Yes, sometimes you should.
Yeah, because we have to report things if we see them. But to say, what if instead of being like, have you seen those kids on the street? They are a mess. You know, to be like, I wonder why. Like, maybe we should go knock on their door and have them over, or see if they can, if they need anything. And a lot of times they do. So when you look at the foster care system, where do you see God at work, and where do you see like the biggest needs?
Yeah, I think, just this past week of just seeing our first placements family come to a thing at our church, and not that they have to come to our church, because there is a church that they're involved with, but just seeing that kind of full circle of like, okay, this is what a healing family looks like, and they're really honest with us of like, our struggles are our struggles. And like, she told me the other day, she was like, this is going to be the demons I chase till the day I die. like this is my thing, and that she wants accountability, and she wants people to come in. And she also told me though that like, she's been so hurt by people that like, she just doesn't have anyone. And I was like, well, we're family. And so I think that's a huge thing, of just to see the bigger yeah, sorry, I got really lost.
No, that's fine. No, I love that. Well, and it is such a full circle thing. When they came to church this week, it was just this week actually, which I feel like this interview with you has come at a time where everything is coming to a head. It's like they came to church this week. You're adopting next week, which again, it feels like this is all sped up, but this has all been like months and months of please pray for this, please pray, please pray, please pray. We don't know what's going to happen with them next, and now to be like, oh, there's a court date, and it's like next Friday. So all in all, as we kind of wrap up, what are just the biggest things that God has taught you through this journey, through ministry, foster care, and motherhood? All in all, like all the things we've kind of touched on. Where do you feel like, well, I don't know, what do you just think God's taught you through all of it and is teaching you, I guess, currently?
The thing that, like, the verse that keeps coming to my head is 1 Corinthians 4:7, which talks about, like, what do you have that you haven't received? And just thinking even, like, every single thing that I have is because something has been given to me. And, like, I used to think a lot of, like, and maybe it's because of knowing that little girl in first grade who was in foster care. Like, why was I born into a stable family and others weren't? Like, I think I did that. I thought about that a lot. And, like, just even, like, I don't know, friends who had, like, kind of hard situations. And I saw, like, my family really loved them, or like single moms, like my family like came alongside a lot, and just this thought of like I mean there's there's nothing I have that I haven't been given. Like I just
it's true.
You know,
it's true. It's
and like same with like I want my kids to see that too, and it's been cool to see them like we've done respite some for them just to welcome other people of like whatever we have, it's like literally a gift from God and to like give that and to share that and to like I think that like without Jesus I like hold things really tightly, and so just to kind of be more loose with it and like I guess kind of tighten that too is to really trust God of like if there's something that I need that I don't have, like he will give it. And it's been cool to see God provide that. And like our life is so different. Like when we first got married, we were like, we're gonna live at Ladera and then we're gonna go overseas, and that just hasn't happened. And there's a lot of things in the world that have like prevented that from happening. And then also like wanting to grow a family and that not happening the traditional way, but then being given this really sweet family that I don't know, just learning to trust God.
And then last question, what advice would you give or even just that you did during those seasons of this isn't going the way I thought it would? And how do you survive a season in life when you have an idea of, I mean, all of us do, you know, it's like, I wish we weren't built that way, but we all are kind of like, oh, I mean, they teach you in school, like make a goal, make a plan, you know? And so we're wired that way to like set up goals for our lives, to set up plans for what I want to achieve. So what do you tell the mom, the college girl, or guy, whoever listens to this, but what do you tell the individual listening to this who like the things that they thought were going to happen are not happening? And how do you get through that season of waiting and trusting God?
I think I don't know, maybe Elizabeth Elliot or something I read in college that was just basically like what you do in the waiting is like the most important and kind of like shapes who you are. And so during that time of like infertility or whatever, we just really poured ourselves into our neighbors. And it was COVID, and Josh was an essential worker, so like he already was exposed all the time. So we kind of just told our family like we're just not going to see you, and we're going to spend a lot of time like with our neighbors. And like doing that I think really gave to me. And during that time too, we actually were connected with 3 other refugee families that were experiencing infertility in like very similar ways that we were.
That's crazy.
And so that was really cool of like finding like kind of like whatever our hurt is, like finding other people who are in the same thing and like okay, but we have Jesus and we have the light, and like this is a really dark area. Like how do we like befriend people that are going through the same issues? So I think just in that season of not it is really easy just to sit and be sad. And that just won't,
it goes nowhere,
get you anywhere. And there were days of that of like or like why is this happening or whatever, but also I think our friends were really great of like including us in their lives. And
I think that's great advice. Well, Caitlyn, thank you so much for coming over. She is a very busy mom, y'all, and had to drop some kids off to come over here and do this. So But I just felt your story is just an important one, and that's what At the Well is really about, is that we all are seeing each other in a way in public, and that seems like, oh, like, look how happy Caitlyn is all the time. She's everything's great, but you've lived all this big stuff, and you've done it with like grace and joy and a faith that has anchored you. And so thank you for sharing your story. It's amazing, and it's still going, and it's neat that I just cannot believe that those sweet little kiddos are going to officially be officially
I know.
your
Yes.
sweet babies. So thank you guys all for listening, and we will have another podcast coming out in a few weeks, so we're excited for that one. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.